Hey guys, before I launch into any major new exciting projects like the Philco Predicta Holiday or that Japanese Bel Air combination TV clock radio, I really want to catch up on the trail of unfinished projects I've left over the last few years. In particular, there's two of them I am committed to finishing before I move on to anything else. One of those is this Philco 643 farm set. If you recall, I'm actually fairly far along on it. I'm almost done with the cabinet. I just want to sand it down a bit and give it a couple more final coats of lacquer, but really I need to wait until the spring to do that because it's just too cold. But in the meantime, I can certainly finish off the rest of it. And I have made a lot of progress on recapping it. Not a whole lot of capacitors to begin with, but there are some more significant problems. If you recall, the audio output transformer was shot, and luckily I did find a permanent magnet speaker that has an output transformer mounted on the frame that I think will work. But I found another problem I haven't talked about yet, and that is one of these very complex coils is really fried. I'll talk about it more in another later video, but briefly, it's this guy. Now, if it wasn't for this parts chassis, I probably just would put this project on hold indefinitely until I can find another one, because this is pretty darn complicated. This is the antenna coil, and this radio has 5 bands, so there are quite a few coils on here, and some of them have a lot of turns. This one appears to be okay, and you can see there's quite a few wires I'll have to wire in for the band switch. I'm curious to see what went bad on this one, because maybe this got hit by lightning or something. That's what took out that antenna coil and this transformer. Who knows what else. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about me finishing off a project that is so old I don't think I've ever even done a video on it. And that is this Admiral TV down here in the corner, which is one of the first vintage TVs I ever got, and I think it was the second one that I ever started restoring. And it just kind of got pushed into the corner and I never got back to it. But since Admiral sets are so fresh on my mind, and I've just recently restored 2 other sets with the same 20x1 chassis, I think it'd really be silly not to finish this one off now because it's so close. So I'm going to pull it out and show you what's left to be done, and I don't think it's going to take too long to get it running. I'm hoping in just 1 or 2 days I should be able to fire this guy up for the first time. So here it is. This may look a lot like the Admiral 24A12 I restored a while back, but it's actually a bit different. This is earlier. In fact, I think this is the first bakelite set they came out with in '48, whereas the 24A12 was from '49, I believe. In other words, it was the second generation. The 24A12 also has a white bezel, and this has gold. It's an easy way to tell them apart. If you can only see the front. If you can see the back, it's a very easy way to tell them apart. Because this set only has the one chassis. 24A12 has a split chassis, power supply audio amp on the bottom, and TV up top. This set has nothing on the bottom, except for a speaker, which I've already removed. And here is the chassis. Now this is, like I said, was one of the first sets I got, and back then the pickings were pretty slim around here. So it actually took me quite a while to find one of these, and in fact I found it in Omaha, Nebraska. And I walked the seller through taking the set apart so it could be shipped separately. Chassis in one box and a cabinet in another. and it arrived without a scratch. Even so, I do not recommend shipping a bakelite TV. I've seen far too many get smashed to pieces. In fact, I had another bakelite set like this, tried to ship it from Arkansas, and it did get smashed into a million pieces. And I've had several smaller sets, like around this size, shipped to me, and they've all suffered damage. So after my 5th set, that's it. No more. I just stopped buying any sets off of eBay if I couldn't get them for a local pickup. Anyway, it was quite rusty when I got it. I spent quite a bit of time stripping the rust off. In fact, I even went so far as to remove the power transformer, which is sitting over here. And I need to do a little bit of rust removal on it and then paint it, remount it. I have already restuffed the electrolytics, and I think I did a fair amount of recapping below, but like I said, it's been a long time since I worked on this. I'm not entirely sure where I left off. Also removed the high voltage cage, sitting up there. I've already removed all the rust from that. Speaker is up in there. So in other words, I've got all the bits and pieces scattered around here. That's one reason I really want to finish this off before anything gets damaged. And the last few bits and pieces are in this box here. So first thing I want to do is pull this chassis out, get it on the workbench, flip it on its side, and let's see what's left to be done underneath. It's a lot of work to strip a chassis down this much, and it's really not for the faint of heart, but once you do, it's a lot easier to work on. This weighs almost nothing now without the power transformer, or the picture tube, or the yoke and focus electromagnet. This chassis was very rusty when I got it, and I spent quite a bit of time stripping the rust off, and then gave it a good wipe down with some steel wool and WD-40, and that was several years ago, and it's held up quite well. I'm happy to see that. Now, I was clearly wrong when I thought that I'd done a fair amount of recapping, because I've barely done any recapping. I've only done a few here, so. Oh, and I replaced those old sand power resistors. There were a couple in here. Now, if you remember, I had some rheostats burn out on the other couple 20 X1 chassis I worked on. I'm happy to say that this one is good. Keep my fingers crossed that it stays good. As for the rest, well, I'll just get busy and start replacing all these old nasty wax and paper caps that are left. And then put this thing back together and see if I can get it to actually work. I want to get some paint going on this transformer, so while it's setting up I can continue on the recap. So first thing I did was I removed carefully the screws holding it together so I can get into all the nooks and crannies better and clean up this dirt. The outer glossy clamshells aren't too bad. I think I can get away with just cleaning them, maybe a few dabs of paint where it's chipped off a little bit. Really what I wanted to do though was treat the iron block here, these sheets which were quite rusty on the edges. First I used a steel wire brush and got all the rust off as best I could and cleaned it off good. And now I'm going to apply some rusty metal primer. Just going to use a brush. Just want to slap it on all these edges here. Get that rust covered up. This stuff dries pretty quick, so I'm hoping that later today I can then put on a final coat. I've used both of these before. Engine enamel is really tough stuff, but it does take quite a while to dry, like a good 24 to 48 hours, especially in the cooler weather. And this stuff works quite well too. Not as glossy, not quite as tough, but just dries a little bit faster. They're both enamels though, and enamels do take a fair amount of time to dry, so in either case it'll be a good 24 hours. I also pulled up this chassis, which is the really rusty one that I showed a while ago for my Admiral F1TX12, which I will be wrapping up really soon as well. Probably do a final look at both of these at the same time. Anyways, I pulled this one up, which is working as a reference. So while I'm working on this, I thought I could look over at this and compare the two. Turns out it's not working out quite so well in reality, because there were just so many production runs and variations of this chassis that I'm finding enough variations that I really just have to go off the proper version of the schematic. For example, we've got this terminal strip here with a 150 ohm resistor, which is tied to one side of that wire wound focus pot that's given me so much trouble in a couple sets because they burned out. Well, you look over on this set and there's nothing there. There's no resistor here, there's no terminal strip, it's just wired straight in. Turns out that was a production change. Only the early revisions have that resistor. In hindsight, maybe they should have left this in, because this set has what appears to be the original wire wound pot and did not burn out. However, this one did burn out, and I ended up replacing it with a beefier version. This is a 5 watt, whereas this is a 3 watt. I read the can a little more carefully, and I was wrong. It actually says you can recoat or top coat when it's fully dry, which typically takes 24 hours. So I'm just going to have to wait until tomorrow to paint this. If you're wondering why I didn't paint this, well, this is actually copper. At some point in the production runs of this set, they added this copper strap that runs around inside. I believe they said it was to reduce hum or interference in the set. I'm also glad I loosened up this top, because I found that there was some rust underneath the surface, so I got that coated. Got to be careful with this though, because there's actually a rectifier socket wired right in there, so you don't want to mess up those wires. So I will put this on the side to dry. Also notice that this transformer is pretty darn rusty too. However, after my experience with removing this once, it is a pain. So what I think I'll try doing is loosening up the 4 bolts, stick out the top here. In fact, I've already got them loosened up, and then just carefully pull it away. So 2 sides are easily exposed. You can easily get a brush in there and just paint that, paint this. The other 2 sides are right up against the chassis. But if I can just move this over a couple inches, I should be able to paint it without having to unwire it. I've also pulled out the service info from this set, Riders Volume 4. Something I wanted to point out. The Early Television Foundation website has a growing library of scanned service info in PDF format that's freely downloadable. However, I noticed they made a mistake on this particular chassis. These pages are huge, they're ledger sized. So what they did is they scanned them in 2 parts. If you go right down the middle, you get 2 8.5 by 11 sheets, which is what most scanners can handle, so they scan one side, then the other. But they're missing this page. So I was reading through all the production run notes here, yada yada yada. And then here was that section about the focus being modified, and that 150 ohm 1 watt resistor, and the focus control, the 2 watt version, the 4 watt version, and so on. And I get down to here, and it says focus, and then it didn't continue on. They were missing this page. They didn't have the notes for the last production runs here. So if anybody's really interested, I suppose I could scan this and post it up somewhere for you guys. Really, really nice to have. Much better than the Sam's info. There's a lot more detailed stuff in here, including this great troubleshooting guide, several pages of it. So you can go through, if you've got a set that's partially working, you got any of these problems, like white vertical line on left side of picture, poor horizontal linearity, yada yada. They tell you what to check for and possible cures and all that good stuff. And then of course, the usual schematics and scope waveforms and voltage data and so on. Not that you can't use the SAMs. In fact, I've got the SAMs out right here. It's just that it's not quite as much detail in it. Alright, so I'm going to continue on with the recapping, and it's just possible I will have this set ready for its first power up by New Year's Eve. Here it is in mid-January, so obviously I didn't get this set done in time for New Year's Eve. Things have really picked up at work the last few weeks, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to work on this set. But I've made some progress. I got the horizontal area cleaned up pretty well down here and up into the video output here. Mainly what I've got left is to put the power transformer back in, do some work on the IF and vertical output and audio output down in here. And silly as it might sound, I think I'm going to replace these few yellow caps that I put in about 3 years ago with these white guys. Nothing wrong with the yellow caps. I've never had one fail or anything, but these white ones are ones that I get from Mauser. They're name brand and they're pretty high quality, and I think it would just be nice to use the same type of capacitors throughout the whole set. I've also done some work on the transformer. I painted the sides just with a brush with some satin black enamel, and then I masked off and sprayed the top with this Rust-Oleum engine enamel. They don't specify whether it's gloss or semi-gloss or satin, but here's how it looks. It's, I guess you'd call it a semi-gloss. I think it's a real nice look. It looks just like the original finish did on this. I painted this last night, so a little less than 20 hours ago. And they say it takes a full week to cure. Applying a little bit of heat will speed that up, but even after less than a day, it's certainly dry to the touch, so I think I could start reassembling that. Now on to something somewhat related. I got the box, or got this box in the mail today, and well, I'll show you what's inside. It's something very unexpected and very much appreciated. If you've been following my videos, you may recall that, I think about 18 months ago, I actually picked up another one of these sets, sort of. It turned out to be a partial set of knobs, a cabinet that had been hacked up with some caster wheels put on and the back was missing, and the chassis had been really butchered. The seller was using it just as a prop, so he wanted to cut down weight, so he pulled out the power transformer and all the tubes and various other parts to cut the weight down as much as possible. The picture tube had been what they call necked, meaning that the neck was broken to let the air back in, and then he just painted it white and stuck it back in the set. So the chassis was beyond redemption. I just salvaged what parts I could, and I've had this cabinet sitting out on my back porch. Since then, I've built up a complete set of knobs. I found a couple possible chassis that may work in the set, but there's one key thing that I'm missing for that set, which is this gold channel plate. It's a piece of plastic, back painted with a brass colored paint that shows you the channel numbers 2 through 13. These never show up for sale. The only way you're likely to ever get one is to get one from another set. So I had actually been thinking about trying to fabricate one from a piece of plexiglass, try to paint it and mask the numbers or something like that. Well, out of the blue, a few days ago I was contacted by a Video Karma member who got one off of eBay. The seller didn't list it very well, otherwise I would have bid on it myself. It just, I think, said old TV channel plate or something like that. No indication that it was from an Admiral. And to be fair, he probably had no idea that it was for an Admiral. Well, this video camera member was kind enough to buy it and offer it to me, so it just what he had paid for plus shipping. So I said absolutely. So here it is. Now, he did tell me there was some minor damage to it. That's the damage he indicated sounded very minor, so I think it'll work out all right. So it looks to be in good shape. And it even has the spring that holds it on the back. So part of the damage is one of these plastic tabs is broken off. That's very common. This plastic is pretty brittle and there's a lot of tension on this spring clip, so that's not at all surprising for that to be broken. Otherwise, it's in pretty good shape. Well, I indicated there was a minor crack there by the 6 and the 7, but that's nothing. Not surprisingly, it's right opposite this. This must have been a bit of force applied right around here. Here's a look outside. It's twilight, so not the greatest lighting, but what I wanted you to see is snow. This is actually the first real snowfall we've had. It's mid-January. That's very unusual for Chicago. It was in the mid-50s just a couple days ago. This has been a very, very mild winter. And now we're supposed to go down into the teens, so I imagine the snow is going to be with us for a little while. I'd say no more than 2 inches though, so not bad at all. So here is the other Admiral 20X122, or maybe more accurately, it's a hodgepodge. So it's definitely a 20X122 cabinet and faceplate. The chassis, I think it's a 30B1. Nice thing about these Admirals is that they made a number of them that are the same dimensions, more or less. Originally this had a 20X1 in it. Since then, I've picked up this 30A1 chassis, and I think this is a 30B. Yeah, this is a 30B1. So the 20X1 chassis is just a single chassis. Power transformers mounted right up in there. Well, on the 30 series, they're split. The 20 series chassis would also work just fine. I have a 24A12, which has essentially the identical cabinet. I did a whole restoration series on that, and that had a 20A1 chassis, I think. So anyways, my point is, all those chassis have the same 4 knobs, the same spacing. So I was able to put this in. And now that I have this, go on just like that. And like I said, I do have the knobs. The only problem left is there's a lot of optical aberrations in this faceplate. I've actually got 2 of these and they both have problems. So right here, I can feel it. It's like it melted in or something. There's an optical distortion right here. And a nice chunk in the plastic just kind of scratched out there. Maybe I can sand those out. I don't know. But anyway, there's some hope left for this. But as I've said, I want to finish off at least a few of my outstanding projects before I move on to anything else. So it could be a while before I get to this, but someday for sure that I will.